All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Legacy Owners Live. I am Michael Glover, and with me is Kale Hamblin. How are you, Kale?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, it has been a very busy week. We are in the middle of giving season, and so our schedules have been pretty hectic, and we've been getting a lot of questions based on some of the things we talked about in previous episodes. And one of those is a continuation on the Charitable Remainder Trust. So we're going to be covering a little bit more questions about that Kel's prepared for us.
Yep.
Awesome. So before we get started, before we get too deep into it, make sure that you are going to legacyownerslive.com and joining the group and asking questions there and joining the community so that you can make sure that you know when these are. Typically, they're every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Arizona time. And we would love to assist you and help you with family office, with legacy giving, philanthropic giving, things like that. So head over to legacyownerslive.com to register for free. All
And
right.
just a quick thing. Also, if you do ever have questions that you'd want us to answer or anything that you'd want us to go over, you can leave comments on our social media, like on LinkedIn and stuff, because we'll look at all your questions that we have and we'll take those and incorporate them into the lives. So
Absolutely.
that's a good way to have that interaction with you guys as well. And we do check our comments as we're live right now, but if you wanted us to talk about something, just put a comment in LinkedIn or something and we can go over it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We're all over the place. And wherever you comment, we can see it and we'll be able to throw it up here as well and answer your questions live on the show as well. So that'll be good. All right. So, Kel, what kind of questions do we have to get started regarding charitable remainder trusts?
Yeah. So the first one is just, what is a charitable remainder trust? We call it a CRT as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that and how does it work?
So a charitable remainder trust is a split interest gift. There's a lot of different types of charitable trusts. There's charitable remainder annuity trust. There's charitable lead trust. There's charitable remainder unit trusts as well. I mean, there's so many different variations of what a charitable trust can be and how they work, but they all in essence are a split interest gift. So whenever you gift to a charitable trust, it's a legal entity that you actually set up. It gets its own EIN number, and giving a gift to that creates a partial deduction, right? But the reason for that is because it also spins off income. So whether it's a charitable remainder trust where it's splitting off income to the original donor, and then the remainder stays with the charity after either a lifetime or term of years. If it's a charitable lead annuity trust, that's the opposite, right? Where the income spins off to the charity and the remainder goes back to the original donors. And so there's a lot of different variations on split interest gifts, but charitable remainder unit trusts are pretty common. There's also net income charitable remainder trusts. There's net income with makeup provisions, and those can be all very detailed and technical. We can go over those if you guys like, but just know that there are different variations of how the trust works and what kind of income gets paid out and things like that. So there's a lot of different variations of those split interest gifts, which charitable remainder trust is one of them.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I have. I have a charitable remainder trust as a gift of cash or other property to an irrevocable trust. The donor receives an income stream from the trust for a term of years or for life, and the named charity receives the remaining trust assets at the end of the trust term. The donor receives an immediate income tax charitable deduction when the CRT is funded based on the present value of the assets that will eventually go to the named charity.
That's right. That's right. And that named charity can be a specific charity that you designate, or it could even be something like a donor advice fund as well.
Okay.
Which is really good to have, just because, sometimes, especially when you're talking about lifetime, if someone in their 50s sets up a charitable remainder trust and the life expectancy is 45, 50 years, people are living longer these days. It can be difficult to reassign beneficiaries while you're living, or especially after you're dead. But Having that as a donor advice fund makes it more flexible to where now you're the advisor on the fund, or you have successor donors to the donor advice fund where they can pick what kind of causes and things like that they can donate to.
Okay. So yeah, you did just answer that question. You can change the beneficiary of a CRT.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. While the original donors are living, once the original donors are passed away or gone, that's pretty much set.
Okay. And then how many beneficiaries can a CRT have?
Right. So there is no limit technically. You do want to kind of keep it simple, but there really is no limit on how many beneficiaries. Some people have specific charities in mind, and they may have 3, 4, or 5, whatever, 10 different kind of charities, depending on how big the CRT is. At the end of its life, can go to a whole bunch. But then that's how a donor advice fund really simplifies things, is because sometimes charities suffer what's called mission drift, and they are no longer fulfilling the mission that the original donor wanted. And so changing that can be a little sticky and difficult. But having a donor advice fund and having that set up properly makes it so that advisors can advise on which charities go at that time and which charities have those statuses at the time that grants can be going out. And so I just had a conversation with somebody the other day, actually, where setting up a donor advice fund as your family foundation is a good idea, because we have a donor advice fund with my family, and we use it to help train our kids. We've talked about that before, right? And we give throughout our lives, and not just going to be funded by life insurance or charitable trusts or anything like that, but the donor advice fund is an active vehicle that we're using for charitable giving. But with the CRT, when those funds move from the CRT into the donor advice fund and it's funded, right, now you can give to specific charities and specific causes as a family, and those successor donors have been trained in order to do that on, what kind of charities do you want to work with and how can that benefit the family and show, social impact.
Okay.
And so having that donor advice fund is kind of simplifies things, rather than, after your death, you have, the big estate planning meeting and all that kind of stuff, and you're making sure that all the right provisions and portions are going to the right charities. Instead, have it just go all to the donor advice fund, and have those advisors have those advisory rights, have them advise on where those should go.
That's nice to have.
My own opinion.
Yeah. And we did talk about donor advised funds last week, and there's blog posts on donor advised funds as well, if anybody wants more information on donor advised funds. But yeah, that's nice to have.
Absolutely. I was just looking to see if we can, let me just create a banner here real quick. We have a bunch of articles right here at legacyglobal.org. So if you want to check out articles on that, legacyglobal.org has a ton of resources on charitable remainder trusts, donor advice fund, family councils, things like that. So go check that out as well.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the charitable remainder trust distribution rules?
The charitable remainder trust distribution rules. So as far as, I guess, kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So what I have is, this is what I saw on the internet. It says payouts are taxable with the CRT. The donor must pay tax on the income stream, which is categorized into 4 tiers. Number 1, ordinary income and qualified dividends. Number 2, capital gains, which is like short-term personal property depreciation, long-term gain. Number 3, other tax exempt income. And number 4, return of principal.
Okay.
So is that right with what are the distribution rules?
Right. So as far as distributing income, the reason why a lot of people do charitable trusts, charitable remainder trusts, is so that they can avoid or limit capital gains tax on an appreciated asset, right? And so when that sends out payouts, that tax rate is lower at an income tax rate rather than at a capital gains rate. And so that's kind of a strategy that a lot of people are using, especially with cryptocurrency, is they're trying to donate into the cryptocurrency, into charitable remainder trust, to limit that capital gains tax and still receive an income for the rest of their lives based off of the donated asset, which is cryptocurrency. Now, you can avoid the income tax by redonating that income before you receive it. And so instead of receiving a K1 from the charitable trust and receiving that income, you can just choose to redonate that to preferably a donor advised fund, something that's managed where you're maybe the donor advisor, you have the donor advisory rights. But then you can get an additional deduction on that income tax rate.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Does the frequency of payout change when the trust is valued?
So when it's valued, so the payout rate can actually change. Typically you'd set it up to be, a certain rate when you set it up, like a year. You would have annual payouts or quarterly payouts, something like that. But if you wanted, you could redo a calculation and have it pay out, half of the year, and then do another calculation of how much it owes you for the rest of the year as well. So you set it up as an annual rate, or a monthly rate or whatever, but that can change a little bit depending on if you're needing, the income that it can produce more frequently as well.
Okay. And if the trust earns more income than it's paid out, does it owe taxes on the excess, like on the extra?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So it's a charitable trust, so it is tax exempt. So if it earns more, it just adds more to the corpus of the charitable trust, which is the amount that's actually invested. And then on a charitable trust, it gives out a certain payout based on a percentage of things. And you set that when you set it up, and that can't change once you set it up because you get a deduction. And the minimum payout is 5%, but you can go up from there. But usually if you take out a lower rate, the bigger your deduction is going to be, right? And so as far as being taxed on how much it makes, no, but you get taxed on the income that you receive from the trust.
Okay. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there limitations on which financial properties a CRT may invest in?
Are there limitations on what they can invest in?
Mm-hmm.
So because it's a charitable entity, you don't want to invest in debt or leverage or what else? Pretty much those. Can you think what's the other one we talking about? Go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was going to ask you what other. I know we talked about it earlier, but it was debt and leverage and margin.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Funds cannot be invested in a family organization. This would cause private inurement. Yeah.
That's right. So they can pretty much invest in anything, just not the family business, where you would gain a benefit. The IRS does not like the double dip there. So you would want to avoid anything like that, but they can invest in real estate, cryptocurrency, stocks, any kind of securities, annuities, things like that, life insurance even. There's a lot that you can invest with it. And what's interesting is when you set up a charitable remainder trust is you can be set up as a co-trustee in charge of investments. And so you can actually choose where those investments would go. But there's also caveat to that. If it doesn't perform well, then you're to blame because you're the one that picked the investments. And so normally you work with financial professionals, and depending on what your risk factors are, you can pick those kind of investments as well.
Okay. And then since income received is taxable to recipient, can taxes be withheld from payments?
No, there's no withholdings. And so unless you, like we said before, unless you push that income to another charitable entity like a donor advised fund or a public charity or something like that, you're going to receive a taxable income off of that. You can't withhold those. So, so that's important to know, just because, you can't, with the deduction though. Now, this is also interesting is when you receive your tax deduction from at the very beginning of your CRT the CRUT, right? Let's call it a CRUT because CRT now means something a little bit different these days than charitable remainder trust.
Yes. Yeah.
But but you get a deduction, and you can actually take the deduction the first year and an additional 5 years, and you can spread that over. Okay, so you can spread that deduction over the total of 6 years, or you can take it all at once, right? Depending on what kind of taxes you're facing between when you open the CRT and that total of 6 years, the year that you opened it, and then the 5 after that, you can spread that out or take it all at once. Or if you receive a bigger tax liability, year 3, you can use the remainder of that deduction over that time frame as well. But that's something you would work with like your tax professionals with.
Okay. That's pretty much all the questions that I have on Charitable Remainder Trust.
Awesome.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. So as far as charitable trust, you can be too young to take out a charitable remainder trust.
Okay.
Because the IRS does a calculation, and if you are expected to live longer or too long, then you fall underneath that 5% minimum distribution, and then you can't take out the CRT. Because like I recently did an illustration on myself, and I'm 36, and if I were to put in like a $5 million gift into a CRT, because my life expectancy is 50 plus, I think it's like 55 plus years or something like that, my rate falls to 4.85% with the IRS calculation. And I can't run illustrations based on that. And so I probably have to wait till I was a little older to do something like that. Now, there are other charitable gifts, though, right? We have our donor advice fund, which is awesome right now because up until the end of 2021, which is the year we're recording this, right, you can give up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. Whereas previous years and what's happening next year is that falls down to 60% of your adjusted gross income. And so there are other charitable vehicles if you're looking for a tax deduction, or if you're wanting to do philanthropic giving, right? There's a lot of different type of charitable entities that you can give to. Program funds, pooled income funds. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So
there is a lot.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad it's getting a little. Today's episode is a little short. I will be in Miami next week, but we will be back for next week, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break because of the holidays and hectic schedules and year-end giving and all that kind of stuff. But do go to legacyownerslive.com, sign up. If you guys have questions, we can answer them there for you as well. We can also set up appointments with you one-on-one to discuss your particular situation and see what we might be able to do for you there. If there's anything else, Kale, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys very much. We'll see you guys next week.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.